Hey, this is Josh from the Sports Fury, and this is my review of ESPN's 30 for 30 documentary. This was the XFL. Now, when I first heard that ESPN was doing a 30 for 30 documentary covering the XFL, I thought, yes, absolutely, this will make a perfect topic for one of the documentaries. And I've been a huge fan of ESPN's 30 for 30s. I've watched every single one of their documentaries, and they're all fantastic, and I highly recommend you guys check them out. And the XFL, that was one of Vince's craziest, ballsiest, strangest ventures that he ever partook in. And that's saying a lot considering Vince McMahon and the WWE have done a lot of crazy things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this documentary into 6 different parts. And you can see that over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you my take and the overview of this 30 for 30 documentary, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. So starting with the beginning and the formation of the XFL and how it came to be, it was created by Vince McMahon and Dick Ebersol. And I really liked how they touched up on how Dick Ebersol was so crucial to the WWE back in the 80s and putting wrestling on television. He helped create Saturday Night's Main Event with Vince McMahon. He saw the potential for wrestling on television. He saw the characters, the intensity of the wrestlers. He saw the whole spectacle of it, and that it was a match made in heaven to put wrestling on television. And the fact that he was so instrumental on teaching Vince McMahon and the WWE about TV structure, script writing, and being able to put that to use later on by Vince McMahon, later on when he created Monday Night Raw, which is still running today. So I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. Dick Ebersol is a genius, and everything he did in the 90s was fantastic when on NBC. So I remember all that stuff. I remember the NFL being on NBC. I remember the NBA on NBC. I remember it like it was yesterday. That was all great stuff, and he was responsible for all of that. In fact, he was named the most powerful man in sports. The guy was a genius. Now, what happened was, in the late 90s, in 1998, the NFL, their contract with the NBC was coming up, and the NFL wanted $500 million for the rights to air their games. And Dick Ebersol, he wasn't going to do that, because to do that meant losing $100 million every year. So he had to make the tough choice of letting the NFL walk, and I can't believe how tough that was probably for him, because the NFL, come on. And so the NFL goes ahead and makes a deal with CBS and Fox. They give Fox the NFC and they give CBS the AFC. And it's still like that to this day. They still show the NFC and AFC games on their channels. So when that gap was gone by the NFL, he was saying that he needed to fill that with possibly another football league. And it just so happens that at that time, Vince McMahon is coming up with the XFL. And Vince McMahon, on February 3rd, 2000, he announces that he's creating the XFL. He has the logos, he has the helmets and everything. He holds that press conference. And just in wrestling fashion, in Vince McMahon fashion, he starts shooting on the NFL. He starts saying that they're the no fun league and we're the extra fun league. So he starts making jabs at the NFL, saying also that he misses and he wants to bring back smash mouth football. And he wants, just brutal football, because in the NFL, this is where they really start making changes and start making rules to prevent injuries and stuff like that. So Vince McMahon wants to bring back the brutal style of football, saying that this was going to be no league for, panty wearers and, sissies. Just jabbing at the NFL. And I just thought that was hilarious, because, he's doing these wrestling shoots on the NFL. And Bob Costas didn't really like that, and I just thought that was hilarious. And we'll get into Bob Costas later on. But I just thought it was kind of weird that Vince McMahon, he announces that, and he has no real plan at that time. Um, so Dick Ebersol, he sees this and he calls up Vince McMahon and says, "Hey, do you have a TV deal yet?" And Vince's like, "No." And so they get together and they announce that they are partnering up, the XFL and NBC. Meanwhile, nothing else is really put to ink, like how it's going to work, the teams, the cities, stadiums, players, how they're going to go about that. None of that is covered, but in 1 year's time, they're going to be taking the field and have their first season. So that was crazy, and I also thought it was funny how Dick Ebersol had to like really let his guys at NBC know, like Bob Costas and all those other sports guys, and let them know you're not going to be covering the NFL. That's not going to work. We're going to be using their guys because this is going to be more entertainment and less like serious NFL legit type of coverage. And Bob Costas was really pleased by that because he didn't want anything to do with the XFL, and I just thought that was hilarious. So that's how it starts. So that's how it gets into formation. Dick Ebersol, he loses the NFL and he fills that gap with the XFL, and he has a great relationship with Vince McMahon. They did great work before together, and they're hoping to make something happen here. And let's see how it goes. So now it's time to really sell this to the public. And the build-up and the hype to the XFL was absolutely fantastic. It was probably the best experience of the XFL, the most successful probably, because the build-up was fantastic. The promos were great. They were showing guys running and explosions happening all alongside them. They showed this one promo where he's catching a ball, because remember, in the XFL, there's no fair catches. So he's catching a ball, and this wrecking ball just nails him. Just really painting the picture that this was going to be brutal, smash mouth football. Nothing like the NFL. They're going to take it to the extreme. And they did a fantastic job with that. And I also thought it was hilarious where they kind of did an invasion angle. Wrestling fans know exactly what I'm talking about. Invasion angles are done all the time. And what I'm talking about is how they had an XFL blimp do a flyby an NFL stadium. It was a Raiders and Dolphins game, they said. And people saw the blimp and everything. And then right after that, it crashed into a seafood restaurant. And that's all anyone really remembers now. So that was hilarious. And if that's not an omen, I don't know what is. But, you know, it really speaks to the fact of how great Vince McMahon is. Because, remember, still at this point, they have no players, no coaches, no teams, no stadiums, nothing. This is just all promos. And Vince McMahon is the greatest promoter of all time. So, yes, the build-up and the promos were great. And, you know, and it wasn't until after Christmas that they really started hiring staff and coaches and people in football operations. And they started having a training camp for the players. And the players were showing up, and they were talking about how they were only getting per diems. They weren't getting paid. They didn't have any contracts. They weren't getting any weekly salaries. These guys were there because they wanted to be there. They wanted an opportunity to potentially play professional football. So I thought that was very interesting. And later on, eventually, they would get paid. They had this pay-to-play system set in place, which I thought was very interesting because basically they were getting paid $4,000 a game. But if they won, they would get a bonus of $3,300. So you really wanted to win. And I kind of wish they would probably maybe bring that to the NFL, because I would bet things would turn out just a little bit differently sometimes, because if you're getting bonuses to actually win the game week to week, yeah, that's going to spark the fire in a lot of people's asses. So I just thought that was really interesting. And what was also pretty fucked up was how by the time the teams are formed, they only had 30 days until the season started. The first week, they're ready to go. 30 days. That's it. That small little window. That's just crazy, and just also shows that even though Vince McMahon knows wrestling and is a great promoter, he knows nothing about football. I wonder if he asked anybody, about that shit. Did he ask any people that were from the NFL? Did he, try to get any kind of consultants on like the football operations and how that's going to work, so that way when the season kicks off, we actually have good football being played? It didn't seem like he didn't do any of that. He was just mainly focused on the entertainment aspect and all that stuff. So leading into the debut of the season, these guys only have 30 days to prepare and come together as a team, and that is just impossible. So, yeah. So at the debut of the XFL, their first game, it sells out. Their promos, their hype, their build-up, it all works out. People are interested to see what this XFL has to offer. They even have 2 miles worth of traffic of people trying to get in. Dick Ebersol ominously says, he was looking out at all the people and saw all these people trying to get into the game, and the sun was setting and it looked real nice. And then he says, that would be the last great experience I would have of this whole thing. And I'm like, damn. So, anyway, right before the game starts, I thought it was pretty funny how they said and thought that Vince McMahon was supposed to just be a guy in the back, and he would not get in front of the camera. He wouldn't be a character or anything like that. And I kind of just laughed. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Vince McMahon's going to be front and center, especially if something of this magnitude. And sure enough, he was. He goes out to the middle of the field with a microphone in hand, and in his Vince McMahon way, he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the XFL." I love Vince McMahon. He's awesome. And then he hands the microphone to Dick Butkus. I'm a huge Chicago Bears fan. And so I'm thinking, Dick Butkus? And they explained that he was there to legitimize the XFL. But then they also say, it was kind of messed up because Vince McMahon had just spent a whole bunch of time trying to downplay the NFL, saying they're a bunch of sissies and this is going to be a real man sport and whatever. And here's Dick Butkus to legitimize them, I guess. But I don't know. I guess maybe if Dick Butkus was if he was a young guy at that time, maybe he would rather play in the XFL than the NFL, because Dick Butkus was a brutal guy. So now the kickoff. Before the kickoff, the coin toss. There is no coin toss. I thought that was really strange. Instead of a coin toss, they had a scramble. And what they would do was they would have a football placed on one end of the field, and they would have one guy from each team run out to the football, and whoever got possession of the football first, their team got possession. And that was in play instead of a coin toss. And I just thought that was weird, and it didn't work out. A lot of people got hurt. Yeah, that was different. But their first game of the XFL, it was boring. It was terrible. The gameplay was just atrocious, but what can you expect if you give guys only 30 days to prepare? They've only been a team for 30 days. It was impossible. It was set up to fail. So of course the gameplay was terrible. It was just atrocious football. And they said that they walked out of that game going, we got a lot of work to do. And but after the game, they said that the ratings were fantastic. They got 54 million people to watch that shitty ass game. That's the power of promotion, folks, by Vince McMahon. But 54 million people to watch that game. That was incredible, and that was, I guess, that was a highlight for them. But everybody that was who really knew what was going on went, yeah, I doubt we're gonna get that again, because the gameplay is terrible, and there is some things that we need to work on. So yeah. And the critics, they blasted the XFL. They thought it was a joke. It was just absolutely ridiculous. They all shitted on it, and rightfully so. It was just an embarrassment. But they got 54 million views on their first game. But it wasn't going to last. But yeah. So that was a debut of the XFL. And things from there just didn't really go well. The downfall of the XFL. It really came in that week 2. That's what I took away from the documentary. Because in that week 2, a lot was riding on it. Because coming away from that first game, where 54 million viewers watched it, there was just a lot riding on that second week. The Rock shows up and everything. And so they really needed a good game. And they got one. The game was great. They said that it was just phenomenal. The plays that were being made, the scoring, it was just going down the way they wanted to go down. That is until 13 minutes in, where they said the feed cuts. The trucks die. All the feeds are just dead. And everyone's scrambling, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, right? Meanwhile, back in New York, Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live, who created it with Dick Ebersol, he's over there panicking because he wants to make sure that they are still able to go live, because they have Jennifer Lopez hosting. So it was a big deal. And Dick Ebersol is ensuring him, yeah, we're gonna be able to cut you guys in time. But they're still trying to figure out what's going on, and they find out that the generators are empty of gas. Nobody thought to fill them up. How the hell does that happen? So the generators are empty, and now they're scrambling around and they're siphoning gas to put in the generators, which that's just hilarious. And I could just see Vince McMahon just red. He is fuming and cussing everybody out, and he is just blowing up. And I could see Dick Ebersol doing the same thing. So they had to cut to the B game back in Orlando while they figure everything out. And eventually the game comes back on, and they end up having an injury towards the end of the game. What took 15 minutes to get him off the field. And I could just see Dick Ebersol going, come on, end this game. And then the game goes into overtime because it was a great game. And I could just see them going, why didn't this shit happen a week earlier in the first game? Why couldn't we get this game? Why does it got to go to overtime? Because they need to get back to Saturday Night Live. So it goes to overtime. And Tommy Maddox, who would go on to play in the NFL, he makes 2 miracle touchdowns to set it into double overtime. And they're probably really just shitting on this game now. They're just like, why won't this shit end? And why does the XFL have a double overtime? Because the NFL does it. So they go to double overtime, and the game finally ends, and they finally cut to Saturday Night Live which had to start taping because it took so long. So Lorne Michaels is just absolutely fuming. And then the ratings came in for this game, and they were absolutely terrible, like a 50% drop off. And it also hurt Saturday Night Live's ratings. So it was just a terrible, terrible, the worst thing that could possibly happen. And the writing is on the wall, I feel, from that point on. Because how do you recover from that? Especially when you're starting out new. You don't really. And things just got really weird, you know? Vince McMahon decided to take a direction to where he wants to make it more focused on entertainment and started getting really extreme with that and making it more WWF style. But the thing about doing that was it really doesn't appeal to anybody, because the people who want to watch a football game, they don't really become interested in that stuff, right? Because they don't probably watch wrestling. So they're trying to watch a football game. They're seeing all these weird promos and vignettes, and they're just like they're put off by it. And the people who would enjoy that stuff probably don't care about the football. So it really doesn't appeal to anybody, and people just stopped watching. People stopped coming to the games. It was terrible. And the media and critics really shitted on the XFL, and and rightfully so. It was just terrible product. And it even led Vince McMahon to go do a interview with Bob Costas, and Bob Costas grilled him, and it's a famous interview. I highly recommend you go watch that interview, Vince McMahon and Bob Costas. It gets very heated between them both. It's great stuff. But and then they finally have their championship game, the XFL Championship, $1 million game. The Los Angeles Extreme. They win their only championship, and that was it. That was the last game. Dick Ebersol and NBC, they did not want to continue. Even though they had a 2-year contract, they did not want to do another season. So Dick Ebersol said that he used his friendship with Vince McMahon to convince him for him to not continue neither, because it wouldn't work. It would just hurt. It would just hurt everybody. So NBC backs out, and Vince McMahon, doing what he doesn't do really, especially up to this point, he admits defeat and decides not to continue another season. So, yeah. I bet that was really tough for Vince McMahon to admit defeat, because as wrestling fans know, Vince McMahon doesn't do that. But it had to happen, and, the XFL, it ends, and after only one season. It was a crazy ride. It was a crazy experience. And Vince McMahon gave it a go into a football professional league, and it just didn't work out. So I'm going to list some of the good things and the bad things that I took away from this documentary that came from the XFL. Some of the good things that I liked about the XFL was how they really showcased the players' personalities. The NFL, it's still known to this day as the no fun league, especially back then. But the XFL letting their personalities really flourish and everything, because that's a huge thing in wrestling, and Vince McMahon knows a lot about that and how important that is. And letting his players do that was great. Like letting them have their nicknames on the back of their jerseys. That was pretty cool. I don't think that would work in the NFL, although some of them might be good. It would get carried away. So I wouldn't want to see that in NFL, but that was pretty cool for the XFL to do that. Of course, the best one was He Hate Me. That was the most popular one by Rod Stewart, who would go on to the NFL. The funniest one that I heard from the documentary was Teabagger. That was fucking hilarious. Whoever came up with that was just that was funny. Another one of the good things that the XFL brought was miking the players. That's something that the NFL uses to this day. And it's a great feature, and it's awesome to be able to listen to what the NFL players are talking about and kind of get a sense of what their experience is like as they're playing the game. So miking the players was a great thing that the XFL brought up and that the NFL went ahead and adapted. So that came from the XFL. Another thing that came from the XFL that's very important to the NFL today was the Skycam. They introduced the Skycam. And that's used today in the NFL. They adapted it from the XFL. If it wasn't for the XFL, there is no Skycam. That was a great invention. It was a great idea, and thank you for that one, XFL. So that one was good. Now, some of the bad things about the XFL, a lot of the coaches and the staff, they really didn't care for the XFL. They were traditional, as they were saying, college football coaches and stuff like that, and they were really looking forward to their personal careers, So they were just using this as a platform to further their careers, So they didn't like and they didn't partake in none of that extracurricular stuff, the cameras in your face. They didn't like any of that stuff, so they didn't really care for that, and that kind of like made it off-putting. I didn't like how the Smash Mouth football was played. It was just ridiculous. As they explained in the documentary, it didn't translate well. People think, especially today when the rules are even more strict, you can't touch anybody really. But also on the other spectrum, you don't want to be too brutal neither, because that doesn't equal good playable football that's fun to watch. It was terrible. It made for terrible footage of gameplay. I mean, it was just so jarring, and people were just off-put by that. And so brutal Smash Mouth football does not work. It's not enjoyable to watch. As they said, that the gap between the hype and the actual gameplay was massive. The hype was great, but the gameplay was terrible because Smash Mouth football doesn't work. I also hated the scramble. That just was so stupid. I mean, just have a coin toss. Quit trying to be... Why do they try to be so different from the NFL? It's just a fucking coin toss. Because the scramble caused a lot of players to get hurt, as they said. And that's another thing that I didn't like about the XFL. The injuries were terrible. If you saw some of the footage of this documentary from the games of the XFL, some of these hits were just horrendous. I mean, some of these poor guys probably got major concussions. They probably suffered major concussions and other injuries from the XFL. And, of course, the XFL doesn't exist anymore, so what are they going to do? So that was pretty bad. So, yeah, people think that Smash Mouth football works, right? They want to see that. They want to see real football. But on a professional level, that doesn't work either, It just makes for terrible television. So those are some of the good things and bad things I took away from the XFL that I caught in this documentary. You guys let me know what some of the things that you enjoyed, some of the things that you didn't enjoy, if you agree with me on that or disagree with me on that. But those are things that I found enjoyable and things that I found to be pretty shitty. So what are my last thoughts? I absolutely loved this 30 for 30 documentary. It's right up there as one of my favorites. This was done by Charlie Ebersol, which is Dick Ebersol's son. And he said that he found it pretty difficult to interview his father and interview Vince McMahon. These two guys who he looks up to, who tried this thing and failed. And he found it difficult to ask him these questions. And I thought he did a fantastic job putting together this documentary. I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it already and you've watched this review, go watch it. It's very interesting. Even if you're not a football fan, even if you're not a wrestling fan, you will find this interesting. And you know what? I'm very happy that the XFL, came to be, because a lot of innovating things came from it that a lot of football fans today from the NFL enjoy, like the Skycam. That's, what would we be doing without the Skycam? Miking NFL players and listening to what they have to say, and cameras going on the sidelines and going onto the field right after halftime, right after a game, and getting intimate with players and coaches and getting their raw emotions. These are all things that were adapted from the XFL that we NFL fans enjoy today, and have to thank the XFL for those things. So I'm glad it happened. Vince McMahon, I know a lot of people find him to be a polarizing figure. They either love him or they hate him. But either way, you have to respect him. And he gave it a go to try to take on the NFL. And, and he came up with some pretty damn good ideas that exist to this day. And especially for all those players that got an opportunity to get paid to play football, to play professional football. And some of these guys actually went on to the NFL. Like He Hate Me. He went on to play with the Carolina Panthers and got to play in a Super Bowl against the New England Patriots. That's one of my favorite Super Bowls of all time. It was a great game. Tommy Maddox, he went to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so a lot of dreams got fulfilled. And even if it was just temporarily, but I'm glad that the XFL happened. This documentary was fantastic. It's one of my favorites. I highly recommend it. And thanks for watching. And if you like this video, please give me a like, subscribe to our channel, and see you next time.